Boker Daf Yomi is Nun Ches of Kesubos 58. So we're going to start right at the very top of 58a, where the Gemara has been discussing the dispute between Ula and Shmuel bar Rav Yehuda about why it is that even though biblically speaking, a woman who is just an arusa, she's just betrothed, biblically speaking, she's allowed to eat from the truma. Well, if she's betrothed to a Kohen, even though she's a Bas Yisrael, nevertheless, the rabbi said she cannot eat until she's married. And Ula said the reason is because we're concerned it's a decree that maybe she's going to give the truma while she's still in her father's home, while she's betrothed to her brothers to drink. And so that's the concern. Whereas Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yehuda says that the reason is because of simpon, that maybe the husband, when he finally fully marries her, will discover a blemish and then therefore say retroactively, our marriage was done under mistaken premise. And so therefore, for this reason, the marriage is retroactively annulled. And so therefore, she ate truma when she wasn't married to a Kohen. So that's why Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yehuda says she has to wait until she's fully married. So the Gemara says, 2 lines from the top on 58a, Michte bein lamar ubein lamar lo achla. So since, according to both Ula and Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yehuda, she cannot eat from this truma while she's engaged, my benayo. Why do we care what the reasoning is? What's the difference? So the Gemara says, Ika benayo kibel maser v'halach. Let's say he was mekabel. So there's three separate nafkamina. The first nafkamina is, let's say her husband accepts upon himself any blemishes that she may or may not have. He says, if she has a blemish, I accept it. So therefore, he can't, even if he discovers one when she's married, he can't retroactively revoke the marriage. It's like, a crude example would be like buying a house as is. You know the house is going to have blemishes on it. You can't say, oh, I was bought under false pretenses. The second example is Masar. Let's say the father hands over the daughter to the agents of the husband. So therefore, we don't have to be concerned she's going to feed the truma to her brothers. But we still would have to be concerned about a blemish. So while she's handed over, is she able to eat from the truma? And the third possibility is halach, if the agents of the husband went with the agents of the father went with the agents of the husband, then also we don't have to be concerned that she's going to feed it to her brothers. So that's that piece. So then the Gemara discussed a case of a woman who, after she was betrothed for a year, then the husband is required to start feeding her. And so at this point, Rabbi Tarfon says, no snila kol truma. So that Rabbi Tarfon says the husband can give her entirely the food, entirely truma. Now, because she's betrothed to a Kohen, and it's after 12 months, and he has to start feeding her, he can give her all truma food to eat. So the reason is because that's what she's allowed to eat. But the problem is when she's in nida, she can't eat from the truma because she's tamei. So Rabbi Akiva says, give her mechza chulin or mechza truma. Rabbi Akiva says he's allowed to give her half chulin and half truma. When she's not a nida, she can't eat truma. So for those days, he has to give her chulin. So Amar Abaye says this dispute between Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva, machlokas bebas kohen lekohen. That's the only dispute there is when you have a daughter of a Kohen who's betrothed to a Kohen. Machlokas is by a Bas Kohen to a Kohen. Aval the Bas Yisrael a Kohen, but if it's the daughter of a Kohen to a Kohen, then under those circumstances, Divrei Hakol Mechza Chulin u'Mechza Truma. So Abaye says that the whole reason for this machlokas is when there's a Kohen who's basically the daughter of a Kohen who's betrothed to a Kohen. That's where Rabbi Tarfon says you could give her entirely of truma because she's an expert in truma and she knows. Rashi said the whole bebeis avia tarach avia imkor truma b'chulin u'mei truma l'fi shehu raga b'kach. So if she is the daughter of a Kohen to a Kohen, and he's starting to feed her, well, guess what? If she gets all the truma, now she's tameya. What's she going to do? Her father can sell it for her, and so therefore it's not going to be a problem. Well, actually, I read the one Rashi down. Rashi says, "Baskal and Bekiya b'shmiras truma or mocham b'mei tumasa." She said, if she's the daughter of a Kohen, she knows how to watch the truma to make sure it doesn't become tamei, and she also knows how to sell it during the days of her tumah, so that the truma, so she could buy a chulin money with it. But if she would be the daughter of an Israelite, she wouldn't be an expert with it, and he can't force that upon her. But says the Gemara, says the Bayav Bas Yisrael Kohen, where if she was the Bas Yisrael to a Kohen, divrei hakol mechza chulin mechza truma, and even Rabbi Tarfon would say you can only give her half chulin, half truma, because she's not, what's she going to do while she's in nida? She won't be able to protect it from becoming tamei, and she won't be able to sell it easily. And then also says, and this was the Rashi I read before, the whole dispute is about an arusa, meaning to say that she's still living in her father's home while she's betrothed. And but if she would be fully married, then everybody says, even Rabbi Tarfon would say he can only give her half truma and half chulin. Rashi explains that if she was in a rus and the daughter of a kohen, that's where there's a dispute, because since she's in her father's home, her father will work to sell it on her behalf. He'll sell her truma so she can buy chulin with it, because he's used to it. But if she'll be fully married, and so therefore her husband's giving her her own mizonos, and she's not living in her father's home, meaning to say that he gives it, let's say, through a third party. So then under those circumstances, how's she supposed to sell it? Because it's not appropriate for her to go out into the marketplace to sell it. As Rashi quotes the phrase "Kol kavuda bas melech panima," that the glory for the princess is to be in the palace and not to be outside on the marketplace hawking her truma. And so therefore she doesn't have her father and her brothers to sell with her. So when she's living with her father, when she's Nisua, when she's fully married, then she has to get at least half chulin. That's what Abaye says, even according to Rabbi Tarfon. So Tanya Nami Hachini, we have a brisa that supports this. Rabbi Tarfon Omer knows now called truma. Tarfon says you give her entirely truma. Rabbi Akiva says mechza chulin and mechza truma. Rabbi Akiva says you give her half chulin and half truma. When do we refer to this? When it's a daughter of a Kohen to a Kohen. Of a Bas Yisrael a Kohen, but if it's a daughter of an Israelite to a Kohen, divrei hakol mechza chulin and mechza truma, because Rashi said then if it's a daughter of an Israelite, she's not an expert in guarding it or in selling it. So she has to get half chulin along with the truma. Even according to Rabbi Tarfon, but when do we say this? Be'arusa is only by a betrothed woman of a Nesua, but by if she's fully married, then even Rabbi Tarfon would say divrei hakol mechza chulin and mechza truma. So even Rabbi Tarfon would say you get half chulin and half truma. So the Gemara then says, the Brisa then brings in another position. Yehuda ben Beseira says no snila shnei. Yehuda ben Beseira taught that you give her shtei yado shel truma v'acha shel chulin. He said that you give her 2 portions of truma and 1/3 of chulin. That was his position. Not half truma, half chulin. He says you give 2/3 of truma and 1/3 of chulin. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says no zingla kol truma. You give her everything truma. V'hi mocheres v'okachas bedamim chulin. Rabbi Yehuda says that you give her everything in truma, and then she purchases with it chulin with that money. And we'll read the Rashi. Rashi says, "Bein Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Tarfon Ika." This means both according to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Tarfon. This is what he's saying. Rabbi Tarfon savar knows truma kadem izonosah. That Rabbi Tarfon's in the position that you give her enough truma for her to support herself. And even according to Rabbi Tarfon, even though let's say she needs chulin because she's tamei ubalim kor truma, and then she needs to sell the truma. Ain to make truma magin lekach ben chulin. She won't have enough to purchase chulin because chulin is worth more than truma. Shara yekar min truma. Chulin is worth more than truma because truma is very limited people who could eat it. Shakol kov tzemalim. Everybody wants the chulin. Nobody wants the truma. Well, Rabbi Yehuda, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, knows they want truma ke shiur. According to Rabbi Yehuda, whereas according to Rabbi Yehuda, you give her the truma of the amount shembas likach machzachuin motifchos min demei machatzis chuin. So you give, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the amount of truma that if she wants to purchase with it half chuin, she will at least be able to purchase with that truma. Avol torech machira muto alal imkor l'tita tachas chuin, but he has to the hardship of selling it is upon him, and there's a slight girsa change in the Rashi. So, but according to the value of the truma, he has to give her the value, but the value of the truma b'shaveh v'likach chuin. That's what, and she takes that truma and she buys chuin. Whereas according to Rabbi Kiva, he has to pay. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Tarfon is saying she has to pay for the expense of selling, whereas according to Rabbi Kiva, the loss is on the husband to pay it. So that's the difference according to Rabbi Yehuda. No, it's not called truma. It's just a question of how much. So Rabbi Tarfon says you could give her the bare minimum kedei mizuno seah, and Rabbi Yehuda says that Rabbi Tarfon is saying that according to Rabbi according to Rabbi Akiva, it's the husband's responsibility. And then we see the next position here, which is Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, "Kol makom shoskura truma nosen lakafayim b'chulin." So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, anytime it mentions that you give her truma, you give her double the amount of chulin. Meaning to say, Rashi says that he's in the position, we don't force her to sell the truma at a discount, but we give her a lot of truma. I mean, we don't force her to sell the truma at the same value as chulin, which will be very, very hard for her. But rather, we give her a lot of truma so that she could sell it cheaper and purchase her chulin easily. And so, Ika benayu tircha. The difference between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon is the who pays for this tircha, because there's obviously a lot of work doing it. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is saying that we make her job easier, but whereas according to Rabbi Yehuda, he's saying that Rabbi Tarfon's other position, that it's her loss, and she is the one who has to work harder, that the husband can wipe his hands and say, I gave you the amount of truma. The Gemara says, the Mishnah said, that the Yavam, if she was betrothed to her husband and he died and she falls to Yibam with her husband's brother, he can't feed her truma even though he's a Kohen. My time, what's the reasoning? Kinyan kaspo amar rachmana, v'hai kinyan da'achafu. The Torah says you can feed the truma to the kinyan kaspo. The kinyan kaspo is the acquisition that the husband has made. But in this case, the original relationship was with her brother, with her husband's brother. So he's the one who made the kinyan, and so therefore she can't eat the truma. And then said if she was married 6 months she was betrothed 6 months with her husband, then it hasn't come a year yet that she can eat from the truma. And also it says if it was 11 months and 1 day, or 12 months minus 1 day, in either direction it can't work. But it said in our Mishnah, Hashna b'fnei abal amr, so even if she was 12 months minus 1 day before her husband, she can't eat from the truma. Why do we have to also say in our Mishnah she was 12 months minus 1 day before the shomeres yavam? She also can't eat from the truma. It's obvious the husband's a greater chiddush. So the Gemara says, yeah, this is a formula of a Mishnah called a zuvein tzarach omer zukatani, where the greater chiddush, the more novel teaching is said first, and then the lesser one is said afterwards. Then our Mishnah said, Zu Mishnah Rishona, this idea that the woman can eat the truma after she's betrothed for more than 12 months. That was the initial teaching. But the later teaching of our Mishnah says that the woman's not eat from the truma until such time as she actually enters into chuppah with her husband. And the Ula explained that we had said at the beginning of our daf today that what's the reason she can't eat from the truma until a year. Ula said because maybe she'll feed it to her brothers, and Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yehuda had said because of simpon, because maybe the husband will discover a blemish. But now we said that the Mishnah Rishona says she can't eat it regardless until she's fully married. So my time, and what's the reason why she can't eat it? According to the later teaching, Amar Ula v'Teimer Rav Shmuel bar Rabbi Yehuda mishum simpon. Ula, and some say Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda says because maybe she'll discover a blemish. So Gemara says Bishlam Ula makes sense according to Ula. Kamai said that the reasoning why he allowed her to eat the truma after she was married. Makes sense according to Ula that. Hold on one second. I think I maybe heard somebody at the door. Hold on one second. Don't go anywhere. Okay, thank you for your patience. Sorry about that. Okay, it makes sense why Ula said that where she's married for more than a year. The reasoning is because maybe she'll give the truma to her brothers. And now he says simpon. But that makes sense because when she's the first time, she's still living in her brother's home. But after 12 months, her fiance is going to say, listen, I'm providing you food. I know what your brother's eating, and he's going to move her into a different home. That makes sense. Now, Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, Kamaisa Mishim Simpon, Basraisa Mishim Simpon. According to Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, who says that before 12 months, she can't eat from the truma because maybe she'll have a blemish. And then they changed their mind. And they said, even after 12 months, she can't eat from the truma because maybe she'll have a blemish. So, my benayu, meaning to say, what's the reasoning? Why is the first Mishnah arguing with the later Mishnah? So why did they change? What's the reasoning why they changed? And they said that she can no longer eat even up until the marriage. So what's the basis for the dispute between the first Mishnah and the second Mishnah? Why is the first teaching saying that she was allowed to start eating after a year and we weren't concerned about simpon, whereas the second one says we're concerned about simpon? The first one was also concerned about simpon before a year. So the Gemara explains, Ika benayu b'dikas chutz. The distinction between them is whether or not an external inspection by the husband is sufficient. Because we say, Mar savar b'dikas chutz shema b'dika, Mar savar b'dikas chutz lo shema b'dika. Because when it comes time to get married, after a year, the husband is going to check her through via the relatives. According to Rishon bar Yehuda, the Mishnah Rishona and the Mishnah argue about this b'dika. A b'dika that was not done by the husband, it was done by somebody else. Does this violate the concern? Does this negate the concern of simple? So the first Mishnah says the b'dika slot shema b'dika. The husband's relatives do the b'dika. That's sufficient. They inspect her. They see there's no blemish. Marasavar b'dika slot shema b'dika. Whereas the Mishnah Achrona, the later Mishnah says, no, this bedika by the relative is not considered a bedika. He has to wait till he's fully married. Well, as Rashi says, the Bezdin Shachrayim Sabri, the later courts say that it's not considered a bedika until she actually has yichud with him and he himself checks her. So now we're up to the Mishnah on the Chesam Beis Hamakdish Ma'aseh Yedei Ishto, somebody who consecrates the Ma'aseh Yedei Ishto, somebody who consecrates his wife's salary. Harei zo osa v'ochalas. So it doesn't matter if he says, I'm consecrating my wife's salary to the temple. It doesn't matter. She can still work and she gets to eat the fruits of her labor. He's not able to really consecrate it. And v'ochalas hamosar, let's say if he consecrates the work that she does beyond what she's obligated to do. Rabbi Meir Omer, at this, Rabbi Meir says such a consecration is considered consecrated, whereas Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says it is considered to be chulin. Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says it's not considered hektish, it's considered to be chulin. So again, let me just say this: if somebody consecrates his wife's work, it's not considered consecrated. But if it's the motor, if it's the extra work that she does, the extra salary, Rabbi Meir says that he has the ability to consecrate, and Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says it's chulin. So Amarav Hun Amarav Yechola Isha Omar Ubala, a woman is able to say to her husband, Eini Nizones, I don't want to be supported by you. Ve'eni Osa. And so therefore, since I'm not being supported from you, I'm only going to work for myself. And I should say, what does it mean, her work? We know that a woman, Rashi tells us, is a wife is the Mishnah is going to tell us on Samach Daled on the base, a woman is supposed to produce a certain amount of thread each week, chamesh slime of the warp. So this, if he consecrates it, it's done nothing. But the extra, Rashi says, hiktish es moser maseh de ishto, maseh oselo yoser aroish apaskul chacham. Let's say she made more than that thread, more than the amount that he himself is getting because he gives her an extra mea kesef each week. The Chacham instituted. So maybe that is what the dispute is about between Rabbi Meir, who says it's hektish, Rabbi Yochanan Sandler, who says it's chulin. So in this context, Rav Huna says in the name of Rav that a woman is allowed to say to her husband, I don't want to be supported by you and I don't want you touching my salary. Because Savar, he's of the position, so Rav Huna is on the position, Kitakinu Rabbanan Mezone Ikaru Maaseh Adeh Misham Eva. What's the main takana? The main takana here, the main reform and decree of the rabbis is that the husband has to support her. And once they said he has to support her, well, now he says, well, since he's supporting her, if she produces anything, he gets her salary. But therefore, she's able to say, I don't want your salary, I don't want your support, and therefore I'm not going to give you my salary. And when she says, I don't want to be supported, I don't want to do it, she has the permission to do it. That's what Rav Huna's position is. He says a woman could say, I don't want your money and I don't want to work. And that's because the main takana was for him to provide mazonos for her. The main takana was for her benefit. So the Gemara says we're in the middle of Nan Chasam Beis Meisvei. The Brayis has a contradiction. Tiknu mazonos tachas maaseh adeh. So it says in the Brayis that they instituted mazonos because they decreed that she gets her salary. This teaches us that the main takana is maaseh adeh and not mazonos. The main takana is that he gets her salary. Gemara says no, change the text. Ema tiknu maaseh adeh tachas mazonos. No, change the text. Say they instituted maaseh adeh. They instituted her salary in place of mazonos. So the Gemara says, let's bring a support for Rav Huna in the name of Rav. The main takana was the mazonos, and therefore a woman is able to say, I don't want your mazonos, and therefore I'm not going to work from you. So what somebody who consecrates his wife's salary, so somebody who consecrates his wife's salary, this is from our Mishnah. So we say, Meisrei Amakdish, she is going to continue to do her salary. My love, are we talking about a circumstance binizonis where he supports her, and yet and so therefore, what are we talking about? What's the scenario here? She says sheyeshlo nechasim umevakesh lasuna. Are we talking about a certain circumstance where he has nechasim, he has property, and he wants to support her? And still, even though he wants to support her, we're being taught he doesn't own her stuff because she's able to say, I don't want your support. And so therefore, he doesn't really have access to her things unless she takes his support. So Gemara says, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a case. The reason why he doesn't have access to her salary at all, it's not considered like he owns it. It's because he doesn't have anything to support her with. He doesn't have food to support her. So of course, he's not going to be able to make a claim against her. Gemara says, well, even Shein in his own well, if he doesn't have ability to support her, well, what's the chiddush here, even there under those circumstances? Well, obviously, if he doesn't have the ability to support her, he can consecrate her salary. Even according to the position that the master can say to his slave, I want you to work for me, and I'm still not going to support you. That's only Kanani. It's only by a Canaanite slave. The look siv be'yimach, where it doesn't say that you have to support them with you. Aval evet ivri siv be'yimach. Well, but by a Hebrew slave, you can't say you work for me and I'm not going to support you. The kolshkein ishta, and for sure his wife, he can't say that. So what do you mean if he doesn't? So what are we talking about here? If he doesn't have what to support her, of course he can touch her salaries. And Marcia, no, seifa itzrachlei. We need the case of where motor, she has the extra salary beyond what she was required to initially. That Rabbi Meir says, hektish, the extra salary which comes is a relationship to the Meir Kasaf that he also gives her. Rabbi Meir says that is considered to be hektish. Rabbi Yochanan Sandler Omar Chun. Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says it is considered to be non-hektish. And this argues with Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish had said, let me just go back and say, Sefer Tzrichaway, that we need the concluding clause to teach us, Pukta b'moser, that Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yochanan Sandler argue about the extra salary. The lo shayach amazonos, because there where Meir says it's consecrated still, it's not related to actual support. V'afagav de'einin nizonos, and even though he doesn't support her, equal mandam or kiddush, someone will say that it'll still be consecrated after the death. Kishayir Shana. We're talking about her extra salary, which he's consecrating it after her death. And this position of Rav Huna, that she can say, I don't want to be supported, and I don't want it, and therefore you don't have access to it. This position of Rav Huna is arguing with Reish Lakish. The Amar Reish Lakish said, "Lo tema time Meir mishum dekasavar adam maktish davashol ba'olam." Don't say that the reason why Rabbi Meir says that a man can consecrate his wife's salary for when and he inherits it, that will be consecrated. Don't say it's because he's in the position that he says a person can consecrate something that's not yet in existence. That's not the reason for it. Now, the time of the Rabbi Meir mitoch sheyachol akufa v'maaseh yadeh. Now, what's the reasoning why Rabbi Meir says that it's hektish? Is because the husband can force her to do her work, and she can't say, I don't want to work for you, and I don't want your support, I don't want to work for you. And it's as though he's saying to her, so it's as though he's saying that your hands be consecrated. So it's not something, it's something that's already in existence. So don't say that the reasoning for Rabbi Meir is because a person can consecrate something that's not yet in existence, because in this case, her handiwork is in existence. Saying let your handiwork be consecrated. The Gemara says, but he didn't say that there. He didn't say let your hands be consecrated. No, because we have the concept, and when it comes to hektish, when it comes to sacred things, Rabbi Meir says a person doesn't intend to say nonsense, so he must be clearly saying something. Nasek Omerwa, then we're going to say that it must be as though he said to her, Yikachi Yadahosam. Since he can't consecrate her work because it's something Davash Lobo Olam, therefore it's as though he said to her, your handiwork will be consecrated. Because we see, according to Rish Lakish, she's saying Rameir says you can't consecrate something that's not yet in existence. So the Gemara asks the question. So according to Rish Lakish, does Rabbi Meir really say a person cannot consecrate that's something that's not yet in existence? Vatanya, but we have a brayso that says, Omer or Isha. Let's say a man says to a woman, after I convert your betrothed to me. Oh, after you convert your betrothed to me, after I'm freed. After you're freed, after your husband dies, after all these prohibitions or these restrictions fall away, you're going to be betrothed to me. After you get chalitza. So Rameir says under all these circumstances, she is betrothed. So we see Rameir says a man can be makdish something that's not yet in existence. So the Gemara says, you're right. From that source, you can. From that source, you prove that Rameir says, other makdish devashov. But from this source, from our Mishnah, it's not necessarily the case that Rameir says a person can't consecrate something that's not, that a person consecrates something that's not yet in existence. Because it's possible that this is in existence because her hands are already in existence. And so therefore, you can't learn it from our Mishnah, but you can't learn it from that brayso. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Meir says the extra salary is hektish. So Amos. So the Gemara says Amos kodesh. When does extra salary become kodesh? I alluded to it because Rashi said it earlier, and it was after she dies that's when it becomes kodesh. So Rav Shmuel Davar Travail Moser Achar Misa Kodesh. After she dies, the extra salary becomes kodesh. Whereas Rav Ada Bar Abba says Moser Mechayim Kodesh. He becomes hektish while she is alive. Havi Bar Rav Papa B'mai. So Rav Papa asked the question, what are we talking about? If we say we're talking about a circumstance where he's giving her food, and he's also giving her extra money. My time, Amar then what's the reasoning for Rabbi Shmuel say that it's only sacred after, it's only sanctified after she dies? Because he's giving her the extra money while she's alive, so therefore he is entitled to the Moser. So let's say he doesn't give her support and he's not giving her the extra money. My time what's the reasoning for Avad Baravo? Says it's consecrated while she's alive. So what's the scenario that we're talking about? So the Gemara says, no, he gives her the baseline salary, but he doesn't give support, but he doesn't give her the extra money. Rav Shmuel Savri Tiknu Mizonos Tachas Masayadeh. Rav Shmuel are in the position. Remember, they said it's only sanctified after she dies. So Rav Shmuel are in the position that they instituted Mizonos support in exchange for her salary because she was getting her salary. Me'akesaf Tachas Mosar. And the extra money because he's getting her extra. Kivan to go Kayav wa Me'akasaf. And since he's not giving her the extra money, that therefore for this reason, the extra salary belongs to her. Whereas Rav Ada Bar Abba Savar, Tiknu Mizonos. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll do this, God willing. We'll pick this up later today. We'll stop here and pick this up later today. Let me stop the recording.